Hi, folks. Welcome to Regulated and Relational, the bi-monthly podcast hosted by the Attachment and Trauma Network. I'm Julie Beam. Happy New Year, and thank you for tuning in to the last episode of Season 5. We've had a fantastic year, and we hope that you've enjoyed the episodes in this season. As we wrap up the season, our staff is taking a much-needed, albeit very short break. So today, instead of a new episode, we're going to share with you one of our season favorites. That's episode 99. It's all about joy and joy stalking. After all you married gentlemen should be resting with comfort and joy this time of year. And we hope that you're finding time to do that right now. Make sure that you also catch up on all the other episodes that you've missed from season 5, because there were really great things. We talked with guests about self-compassion, about neurodiversity, using the arts for healing, neurosequential coaching, and moral injury. And in the fall, we did specific sessions on pathological demand avoidance, reactive attachment disorder, and fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. So if you missed any of these, now's a great time to catch up, because season 6 starts soon. On January 13th will be our first episode, and it'll be a great one. We're going to have an interview with Zaretta Hammond, who's our opening keynote at our new Learning Brain Exchange conference that happens in February. Zaretta has such a powerful message about the science of learning and the importance of teaching with trauma-informed and equity-focused practices. If you're an educator, this is a not to miss session. And if you're not an educator, you're still going to learn some things, and you probably need to tell all your teacher friends about them after you hear the episode. And stay tuned for the rest of season 6. We will be exploring topics such as generational trauma, using humor and therapeutic parenting, healing with nature, and so much more. And as always, we invite your thoughts. We would love to hear what you think about our episodes, even ideas for topics or people we should be talking to. You can reach out to us at any time at podcast@attachedtrauma.org. Wishing you the best of all in 2026. And now, here's this season's episode on Joy Stalking. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Regulated and Relational, our podcast produced by the Attachment and Trauma Network. I'm Julie Beam.
And I'm Ginger Healy.
And we're excited to share with you from both our personal experiences and our professional knowledge what it truly means to be attachment-focused, trauma-informed, and how we can help children impacted by early childhood trauma.
In the first season of this podcast, we interviewed a guest who has occupied such a special place in our hearts, Cissy White. Cissy was a survivor and ultimate thriver of early childhood trauma, as well as an amazing adoptive mom, inspirational writer, and advocate for those healing from trauma. We lost Cissy to cancer 2 years ago, April 2023, but we have not lost her incredible post-traumatic wisdom about joy stalking. Cissy explained being a joy stalker in this way. Living with a terminal cancer diagnosis reminds me that my time is precious. Time is precious for all of us, although we're not always aware of it. And joy stalking is always healing and useful. It's about savoring life through sensing, using my body, absorbing, feeling all the good stuff, all the things that people with developmental trauma are unable to do. When I am able to do these things, I win. The concept of joy stalking is so powerful that Julie and I haven't been able to let it go. And we've often wondered what Cissy would be saying to us now, when in so many ways the world seems more fearful, overwhelming, and more lonely than it was even when we recorded that podcast with Cissy in 2021. In fact, in 2023, the US Surgeon General zeroed in on loneliness as being an epidemic, a major public health concern. He concluded that loneliness and isolation are more than just negative feelings, but they're actually harmful to individuals' health. And the recommendations for addressing the crisis are all rooted in social connection and community. In other words, relationships matter.
Yes, they do. And joy matters as well. Defining joy is not easy. We often go to Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart for helping us define human experiences that we talk about on this podcast. So let's go there. Joy, as defined by Brene, is an intense feeling of deep spiritual connection, pleasure, and appreciation. Joy is often compared to happiness, and Brene Brown covers that as well. This is a quote from her Gifts of Imperfection book, attributed to a woman named Anne Robertson, a theologian and writer, on the difference between happiness and joy. She explains that the Greek word for happiness is, now I can't say it. I looked up how to say this word, you all, and I'm going to say it for you. Makarios. Makarios? Yeah.
Macarios.
Makarios. Yeah. I don't know. I don't have a good Greek accent. But it means happiness. And it's used to describe the freedom of the rich from normal cares and worries. So if you're rich and you don't have normal cares and worries, you're Makarios. Or if you're a person who's received some form of good fortune, whether it's money or health, or you could be described as that. Robertson compares this with the Greek word for joy, which is chairo or chairo. And chairo is described by the ancient Greeks as the culmination of being or the good mood of the soul. Chairo is something that is only found through spiritual connection and comes with virtue and wisdom. It isn't a beginner value, it comes with culmination. They also point out that the opposite of joy isn't sadness, but fear. So I love that the Embark Behavioral Health folks, then it's a national network here in the US of outpatient centers and residential programs that offer mental health treatment to preteens, teens, and young adults. They focus on cultivating joy. They describe the difference between joy and happiness is that happiness is typically a more fleeting emotion, often sparked by a particular moment or an event that brings a sense of excitement or exhilaration. But joy, on the other hand, is more a long-lasting state of being, characterized by contentment and satisfaction with life overall. And because of this, happiness is fleeting and it is circumstantial. And as they point out, when we focus on only pursuing happiness, we focus on pursuing situations and activities that make us happy. But, life isn't a whole series of situations that make us happy, right? Not all of our circumstances end up being happy ones. There is pain and there is suffering. So happiness cannot exist with pain and suffering, right? They're kind of the opposites of each other, but joy can. And that makes joy very interesting.
Yeah. And I love that whole piece about a beginner value. I've never heard that before. And
isn't that interesting?
It's very interesting. Yeah. Well, we're going to go deeper, right? Not just the beginner value here,
exactly.
But still talking about Brene Brown and her definition, it's important to point out that joy, she connects joy with gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And right, she's not the only one. We've heard that before, but she describes it as an increasing upward spiral. I really like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where having gratitude as a trait predicts greater future experiences with in the moment joy. And having joy as a trait predicts greater future experiences of in the moment gratitude. So
right.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think for me, when I hear that and I visualize that spiral of one bringing on more of the other, it definitely reminds me of the birth of my first grandchild. I don't know what I thought that experience was going to be like. I don't know that I gave it much thought. It was happening, and everything else in my life was happening. And sure, I knew I was happy about it, but I hadn't really thought about the intense joy and gratitude that I would feel. And I went to the hospital. This was pre-COVID, and so that was, like we had COVID grandbabies too, and you couldn't go to the hospital in that time frame.
Right.
I could go to the hospital. My husband was traveling, so I took our youngest daughter and we went to the hospital, and we had to wait because they weren't even out of the delivery and into the room where we could be yet. And so we waited and waited and waited, and then we came in there, and and here was this brand new baby, and we hadn't known whether it was a boy or a girl, had no idea about the name. So we were learning all of that information all at one time, right? Joy, joy, joy. And it was joy. It was like this, and then this overwhelming sense of gratitude. I was grateful to be there. I was grateful that I got to experience this. I was, it was like this, such an intermingling of the more joy I felt, the more grateful I felt. The more grateful I felt, the bigger the joy was. Our daughter had decided that my youngest daughter would be the first person other than her husband to hold the baby. So that was extra joy on behalf of, what a sweet, wonderful thing, to have happen. It was just this whole thing that
Yeah.
is exactly the way Brene describes it, of that upward spiral of,
Yeah.
of gratitude and joy. And as I think about that, because I hadn't given it a lot of thought of what it was going to feel like to be a grandparent.
Yeah.
But I'm like,
Yeah.
the mixture of joy and gratitude in grandparenting is huge. And if you if that's about to happen for you, or if that's, part of your trajectory that you aren't there yet, hang on. It's a big deal. And if you're a parent and you're looking at your parents and thinking, what are they, why are they so crazy about these kids? Or why do they respond the way they do? Because it seems kind of strange to them, I think, because it's not the way we responded necessarily to them as children. It is this mixture of incredible joy and gratitude, grateful to be there at this stage in your life, and the joy of this new life that has come into your midst is just, I don't know, I can't experience it.
Yeah.
It was an out of control for me.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So going back to Cissy and the joy stalking idea, it is apparent that joy is an emotion that's really more than emotion. It's something that you can go after, right? You can seek it, you can find it, you can continue to nurture it and grow it, cultivate it, if you will. It is, as Brene's work points out, not a beginner value, but something much deeper. It's deeper than happiness and many of the emotions too. There are many emotions that we don't talk about them in terms of seeking them, like like anger or regret. Nobody's out seeking either one of those, but we also don't really always seek relief, or or even talk about seeking love as much as we talk about pursuing joy. And for me, it's helpful to know that you have to pursue it and seek it, because I spent a lot of years being very puzzled and even mad about joy. I wanted it, or I thought I wanted it, and I knew I was supposed to have it, right, in quotation marks,
Right.
but I couldn't find it. It was in the days when my family was struggling and we weren't really sure. We didn't have words around our youngest daughter's developmental trauma and what it was. We just knew that there was a lot of things happening for her and a lot of things happening to our family, and it was challenging. And there was a lot of pain and there was a lot of suffering for all of us, for her, for me, for the whole family. And I couldn't find joy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed not only elusive, but it seemed almost like a cruel joke that it would be a mention that joy was out there, right? So I was, I was pretty actively involved in our church, and there was always, at some point in there's always a teaching that, throws you for a loop. And this was on the fruits of the Spirit that's outlined in Galatians in the New Testament. And if you're familiar with that, you know that there's 9 qualities that supposedly, if the Holy Spirit is present and working in your life, you'll be able to manifest and find, right? You'll be able to find them and manifest them. And the list starts with love, joy, peace, patience, right? So for me, in my head, it was like, okay, well, those are probably in order of importance, or what you should have the most of fruit wise. I mean, that's what my head said to me, right? I don't know that anybody ever actually teaches it that way, but I was like, okay, love I can get, love I can understand, and understand why it's there. But the joy being in slot number 2 was driving me nuts, right? Mm-hmm. And it was really causing me concern, because I knew I could find and cultivate love. And I knew I could, even in the darkest times in our family, find and cultivate peace. I mean, it was like, it wasn't there all of the time, but I knew I could make myself peaceful with certain activities. And I'm a person who comes with a pretty good amount of patience already. And so I was like, okay, I can even get to the patience piece, but it was the joy that seemed so elusive. And I remember just even talking to folks about that back, a decade or a decade and a half ago, going, there's no joy. I don't find joy. I don't know how to find joy. It's like, I can see happiness in situations, but I couldn't find joy. So I started wondering about the relationship between trauma and joy. And if my trauma, my secondary trauma, right, was somehow blocking the joy. Now, I could witness that my daughter's trauma was definitely keeping her from experiencing joy, because I'm not even sure yet that she's had a lot of joyful moments in her life, even yet, which of course makes me sad. But when I thought about it, I was like, oh, I can see that she doesn't. So I'm wondering if that's what's happening to me and what I can do about it. And the 2 things are very related. The trauma actually blocking joy is a well-recognized thing in the trauma circles. And frankly, your trauma often means that attempts to find joy and to feel joy will actually feel threatening and overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, there's a book called Unbroken. The Trauma Response is Never Wrong, and Other Things You Need to Know to Take Back Your Life. And that's from Dr. Mary Catherine McDonald. And she has a new book, The Joy Reset. And in that book, she explains 6 common barriers or patterns. She calls the 6 thieves of joy. I just found this so interesting. There are ways in which trauma steals your joy. So let's go through those, because it makes so much sense after you hear them.
Mm-hmm.
First one is hypervigilant. If you are constantly scanning for danger, then that keeps your nervous system too activated to rest or receive joy. You can experience joy if you're scanning for danger. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to point out we're not blaming or shaming. Well, then you shouldn't. These are responses to trauma that our body has. So it's about being aware that, oh my gosh, that's what's happening. So the recognition, I think, is eye-opening and so important.
Agree.
The second one is emotional numbing. Emotional numbing is a survival strategy. It's a protection. It protects us from pain. Mm-hmm. It shuts down feelings. And so that makes sense that if you're experiencing trauma and you are in pain, you don't want to feel that, right? And so there is this emotional numbness. The problem is that if you block pain, you also block pleasure. So people who experience depression and dissociation, they report that, yeah, emotional numbing does help lessen the pain, but numbing blocks positive emotions as well. So I
True.
think that is super powerful to be aware
Mm-hmm.
of.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next one she talks about is the fear of loss, the belief that if you let joy in, it will only make the next loss unbearable.
Boy, I can relate to that. I mean, like in our parent support groups, we often just call that waiting for the other shoe to drop, right, Ginger?
Yes.
That,
Yes.
it's a real thing.
Yeah.
We're parenting children with significant problems or disabilities or challenges, or whether they're developmental or mental health or whatever it is. And the healing and progress for those children is never linear. It's always up and down and back and forth and 2 steps forward and 3 steps back and all of that,
Yes.
right? So we recognize the positive growth, but we just don't really want to let ourselves go fully into the joy of that positive forward movement, because we wonder when the bottom's going to fall out, right? When there's going to be another loss, when there's going to be another big hurdle. We know that we're just like, I can't let myself have all that positive because I'm just waiting for the next.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is similar to fear conditioning. That is a learned association. Joy is unsafe because something bad always follows. Like if
Mm,
that's your pattern, it's almost that you're creating that truth, right? And
right.
similar to Brene Brown's entire description of foreboding joy, she
Yeah.
describes that in that book, Atlas of the Heart. And this foreboding joy is born of real world experience, right? That it's that feeling of joy. You can't enjoy it because it makes you feel vulnerable and gives you hope, only to then experience pain and tragedy once again.
Right, right. And you think about all everybody who's experienced trauma, and especially if their situations have been chronic, and
Yeah,
and so forth throughout their life, they've had they've had multiple experiences of pain and tragedy. Um, that it's hard not to have that foreboding joy, right?
yes.
It's hard not to be in that pattern. And that's what is so amazing about Cissy. And when she would talk about her joy stalking mission, because she outlined, she outlined in this mission that in order to get started on looking for joy, on stalking joy, she had to first focus on truth telling. And that truth telling specifically coming from others who'd endured suffering similar to her own. And so it had to be people who in her mind's eye had suffered as much or more than herself. She talked about that, because
Yeah.
them speaking a truth was authentic to her, and that
Mm.
authenticity gave her hope and made her brave enough to think that there was good on the outside, that there was hope on the outside, and step outside of that fear conditioning and to actually find joy, to go seeking it and find it. And I think that that's, you know, I I honor all of that. That yes,
Yeah.
fear conditioning is real and it's a learned association, and it takes a lot of courage to step outside of that for a lot of folks, to go seeking joy.
Yeah.
But it's
I
out.
think you hit it on the head. And I think that is Sissy, how brave she was to stalk joy.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. What an inspiration.
what an inspiration. Well, the last two thieves of joy that Dr. Mary Catherine talks about is guilt and shame. Guilt is that inner voice that tells you that it's wrong to feel joy when others are suffering.
Mm.
And that can steal away the joy from you if
Hmm.
that is that voice in your head. And the other voice in the head could be that a shame voice saying, it's this deep rooted belief that you're fundamentally unworthy of joy. And that is so very real. So for so many people that's what's in the way, you know, of experiencing true joy. So Dr. McDonald talks about building a bridge between trauma and joy for her clients. And I loved that because where do we go from here, right? And she says, you do that through the process of tiny little joys.
Mm.
And just like other things that, help us heal trauma and move toward growth, it's these small micro dosing moments that work. And that feels achievable as well, right?
Yes.
Once we experience these small, tiny little joys, microdosing moments, our nervous system starts to change. And then we start to feel safer. And really, it's like feeling safe enough to make room for joy. And
Mm.
I loved that.
Yeah, me
I thought
too.
that was very wise advice from her. So then, next steps, how to start your own tiny little joys practice. I think I'm going to put that on a sticky on my mirror. My tiny little joys practice.
I love it. I'm excited about this book, actually.
I know, it's really resonating. So, the first thing that she says to do is just to pause and notice. Set an intention to just find one small joy each day. No pressure. It doesn't have to be profound. It doesn't have to be a miracle that you need to be grateful for. Just something that sparks like even the faintest sense of delight.
Mm.
And it reminds me of Deb Dana's work on glimmers, right? Just
Yeah.
notice. Just notice. And I think we can do that. So the second encouragement she gives us in starting our own little tiny joy practice is to name it. Like acknowledge it out loud or write it down. Oh, this first sip of coffee is so good. Or the air smells like rain. Or my kids' laugh just saved me. And when you say it out loud
Mm.
or write it down, it helps your brain imprint the experience.
It is
And we also know that from Dan Siegel, right? That naming something changes the brain. So I thought, yeah, we can do that. That makes sense. That's great.
love it.
So I also think that's good modeling for children to say things out
Mm-hmm.
loud like that. So okay. The next one she talks about is savor it. Let yourself sit within it for just an extra moment. Like, don't just rush off once you have the thought. Like, sit in it, savor it. Even she says 5 to 10 seconds of awareness deepens the impact. So
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And then the last piece of advice she says is share it. Tell someone, post about it, reflect on it before bed, because joy grows when it is recognized and repeated.
I
So I
love
don't
it.
know, that left me just with all the feels.
Oh
I love.
yeah, I love it. I love it. And I think that that's true. Whenever I take the time to recognize something like that, it's,
Mhm,
and then share it with somebody. If I,
mhm.
call somebody over to the window to look at a flower or a bird or
Yes,
something that's right
word.
outside our house, and and notice how, how it makes me feel, it really does magnify that
Yeah,
feeling.
yeah.
That's
So
great.
good.
But I also want to look at joy from a slightly different angle here. And that is that when we cultivate joy, we can use that. It can have a real purpose at helping us in the darkest times, right? And let's face it, we're not sugarcoating it when we say that right now in America, um, a lot of us are feeling a lot of darkness, whether it's fear or despair or confusion or discontent. All of those things are on the rise. What those actively stalking and cultivating joy know that the rest of us may not is that joy can exist alongside pain and suffering. Remember, we talked about that before. Happiness cannot, but joy can. And we can learn this from great teachers who are coming from the oppressed cultures, from groups that have been marginalized, people that have been oppressed. But we get this information both from the world of psychology and the world of theology. I'm going to pronounce this person's name. I don't know if that's correct or not. Toy, Toy. Derricotte, Derricotte, was an American poet, and credited with saying for the first time, joy is an act of resistance, in her 2009 poem that's called The Telecycle. So you can look that up. We'll put a link to that. And that saying has become, kind of well known. Folks will quote it. Joy is an act of resistance. You know me, I'm confused by joy still a little bit. So I was very interested in that. So I did some digging. From many marginalized groups like Black women, the LGBTQ community, and immigrants, to name a few, they've zeroed in on this concept and on joy as an expression that's important in resistance and activism, and what joy has to do with those things, right? So I found a blog that was written in 2017 by a woman named Rebecca Shatler Liberty. She was writing for the Bangor Theological Seminary, and she puts this concept in these words. Attending to our constant connection to a divine source of joy makes it possible to encounter authentic joy even in the most desperate of situations. That kind of authentic joy is countercultural because it doesn't depend on superficially joyful circumstances. For so many people around the world, including women and men marching for justice, circumstances provide plenty of reasons to be angry or frustrated or frightened or so on. And those reasons cannot and should not be minimized or glossed over. Indeed, in them we see the suffering of the cross in our own time. At the same time, we can catch sight of God's hidden presence there and the hope of God's resurrection of life yet to emerge. So she's talking about where we see joy in all of that, right? Resistance certainly holds the possibility of satisfaction, a sense of belonging while being fully ourselves, and a feeling of being in the right place at the right time. One might say that, like chicken and egg, joy is both required for resistance and emerges from resistance. The activist and the writer Rebecca Soinet, who wrote Hope in the Dark, is a great resource for those of us committed to resistance, and puts it this way: joy doesn't betray, but sustains activism. And when you face a politics that aspires to make you fearful, alienated, and isolated, joy is a fine initial act of insurrection. One might even say that joy is the secret of resistance. So really what she's talking about there is that joy, used as the opposite of the pain and suffering, used amidst the pain and suffering, can help disarm and lessen the fear, right? And the despair.
Yeah, that's
so
really good.
wow.
I'm kind of sitting with all that, like it's ruminating.
It's definitely not a beginning value, is it, Ginger? We just went really, really deep there. Really.
Yeah, I was gonna say I had no idea how shallow my thinking had been, because now I'm like, really sitting with all of that.
The other thing that I think I want to give folks permission for, and the reason that I found this powerful for myself, was that I do think there are a lot of dark things happening in the world. And of course, regardless of how many dark things we think are happening in the world, we still watch news and we still watch social media. Like we can't stop ourselves from doing that. And that leads to the emotions that come along with getting the information that we think we need about what's happening, right? But part of the message that sometimes is there in those corners is that things are so awful that we should all be really upset about the awfulness all of the time. And the truth is, our nervous systems cannot sustain if we're upset about what we think is awful all of the time.
Right.
And one of the ways that we can relieve our nervous systems is by by joy stalking, right? By finding the joy and cultivating the joy. And that's, when you were talking about what steals joy and guilt is part of that, like, how can I have joy when there's so much suffering in the world? Well, this thought kind of turns that on its ear and says, you have to have joy to be ready to take on the suffering of the world, to be ready to resist, to be an activist, to speak out, to do whatever your part is to make a difference. And so feeling guilty about that is misaligned. If joy presents itself, if you find the joy, if you need the joy, you should go looking for it. And if you find the joy, you should, let it, immerse yourself in it.
Savor it, share it. All those things.
There you go.
And you know what? That is exactly what Cissy did. And she knew her time was short. And yet I never felt anything but joy in her presence.
Yep.
And I just carry that with me. So I'm so grateful, Julie, that you had this idea to go back to that episode with Cissy and to remind us really what's important. And so I'm just feeling all that and so grateful for that. And we wish all of that for you. We wish for all of you the courage, because it's not easy, but the courage to stalk joy, to cultivate it, share it, savor it in your family, in your community. We just need to remind each other that the pursuit of joy is so important. And when that despair and rage overwhelm us, that's the answer, right? That joy can be the energy that sustains us. You said that so beautifully, Julie. And that's what makes us more resilient. And that's the bigger goal. We're always going to have things that happen, challenges, trials, struggles, but we can adapt, we can overcome, we can bounce forward. And we do that through stalking joy. So here's to hoping that this episode has helped you. I know that it has helped me. And so go find your joy, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye. Wishing you all joy. Hi, everyone. Julie here. Happy New Year. That's a wrap on season 5 for Regulated and Relational. We're going to be starting up with season 6 in January, and our first episode is going to be Zaretta Hammond, who is our keynote for the Learning Brain Exchange that we have coming up in February. It's going to be a great conversation about culturally responsive teaching and neuroscience, all the good things. So make sure you join us. We always want to thank Joe Kramer for donating the music to this podcast. And if you want to check out the Attachment and Trauma Network, you can find us at www.attachedtrauma.org. Thank you for being a listener. We'll see you in season 6.